Hey y'all, it's Cindy, your sassy Southern grandma here, and today we're going to talk about raising those youngins. One of the hardest jobs, the hardest job in the world is raising children. And there's no way in just a short little video I'm going to tell you how to do it right. And believe me, I did plenty of things wrong. But the most important thing is raising good, respectful, kind children, and the rest will fall in place. So today we're going to talk about a few of those things and hopefully give you some tips to help you along the way. If you know anything about me, if I haven't mentioned it before, I am a researcher. I love books, I love videos, I love learning anything that is right in front of me. If I'm doing anything, I want to research about it. One of the great things about being a mom is there's always something new to learn. So there are tons and tons and tons of parenting books out there, and they are different. There's something, everybody has their own certain way they think you ought to parent your child. But you have to treat those books kind of like when you go to the grocery store. If I'm going to the store to get some groceries, I'm not going to take one of everything on the shelf. I don't need one of everything on the shelf. I only go there and get what I need for that day or for that week. I don't take everything in the whole store. So when you're reading a parenting book, and I encourage you to look at different styles of parenting and figure out what's right for you, because no one method is going to work for every child. So when you're reading those parenting books, think about what applies to your child or your children that you have right now at the ages they are right now. Take those pointers that you need at the time that work for you, leave the rest. And don't feel bad about it. You don't need to follow anybody's formula to raise your kids. You're the mama. You're the one who knows how to raise those kids. They're your kids. One of the very important things that, especially in the South, you will hear this all the time, is mind your manners. Teaching your children just to say please and thank you. I don't mean you got to send them to school to learn about table settings and all that fancy stuff. I'm just saying a simple please and thank you. It means so much to people. If someone helps your child with something and they say thank you, it can brighten up that person's day. Plus, it makes your child a more pleasant person to be around. And it shows respect for other people. It shows respect for their elders and the people around them. If a child says thank you or please to another child, it's going to help them get along with people a little bit better. So just teaching some basic manners is a foundational thing with raising kids. Probably one of the most, if not the most important thing, is consistency. It is very hard. It's very hard to be consistent constantly because kids are kids and there's constantly something coming at you, especially if you have more than one. I have five children. And the baby was born when the oldest one was about to turn 10. So they were very close together. They were all right there. So to learn how to be consistent is very difficult, but it's very important. It's important to those kids that when you say something, they know you mean it. When you say no, it means no. When you say yes, it means yes. When you say don't run in the street, it means don't run in the street. They need to understand that they can trust you. They need to feel safe with you, and they need to know when you say something, it means something. It's hard. If they're throwing a temper tantrum for a box of cereal in the grocery store, Lord, that's so embarrassing, and you want to just give them the cereal so they'll stop. But that's not the way to do it, unfortunately. That is just going to teach them that throwing a temper tantrum gets them what they want. So the best thing to do is to say, I said no, we're not going to get that today, and we're going to move on. And I find that if I stay calm, it helped them to stay more calm. Not always, I promise you, there's no quick fix for raising kids, but some of these tips will help whenever anxiety is high, temper tantrums are flaring. If you can stay calm, that will help them to stay calm. The one thing that always sticks out of my mind about saying no and meaning no and sticking to it was a time that I kind of wished I hadn't said something, but we were out at the park one day. My two oldest were little bitty toddlers, and they were in the sandbox, and my oldest son was throwing sand. He just thought that was the most awesome thing to throw sand. Now, if he was just bothering himself, it would be different, but he was throwing sand at other kids. And I told him to stop. 2 or 3 times. And then I went over to him and I said, now listen, if you don't stop throwing sand, we're going to have to go inside. Now, keep in mind, we had had weeks of rain and had not been able to go out to a playground for a long time. So there were lots of moms and kids around. Several people heard me say, if you keep throwing sand, if you do it again, we have to go inside. And he didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to go inside. The sun was out. He threw it again. And in fact, he looked me straight in the eye and threw it again. So we had to go inside. I had to stick up to my word, even though none of us wanted to go inside, but I had to stick by my word. So consistency is very, very important. It's important for them to understand that Mom is there to take care of us, to keep us safe. And when she says something, she has a reason behind it. That's why it's important that we have a reason behind when we say no, when we say yes, when we do certain things. They need to know that we're doing these things for a reason, not just because we're flying off the handle about something. Another thing that's important to teach kids early on is empathy, encouraging them to think about how somebody else feels. If your child comes home and says, my friends were picking on this other kid and he started crying and it was terrible. Ask them, how do you think that child felt being picked on like that? Help them to kind of put themselves in someone else's shoes so that when they're in that situation, they can, number one, not be involved in being the one that's bullying the other kid. And number two, kind of be a friend to that kid and stick up for them. It will help them so much in life, in adult life, in teenage life, your whole entire life. Being able to understand the feelings of other people and put yourself in their shoes is a very valuable trait, especially if they're going to go on to be a leader, if they're going to go on to be a teammate, anything that they're going to do in life. Empathy is something that's very important. So let's be sure we instill that in our kids. Ask them, how do you think that person felt about that? Even when you're watching a movie or you're watching a television show and a situation comes up, use those as teachable moments to say, how do you think that kid felt? How do you think that little girl felt when that little boy said that to her? Ask them those questions. See what they say. You might be surprised how very empathetic they already are. This next one is very hard for mamas. We don't want our kids to fail. We don't want them to get hurt. We don't want them to make mistakes and have to pay the consequences. But you know what? We can't always bail them out either. That's the bad part. That's the hard part. What we want to do is scoop them up, fix their boo-boos on their knees, and make sure they don't fall down again. We want to make sure they don't make bad choices. We want to make sure that we want to be in control. That's what we want. We want to be in control of everything so that they won't make any mistakes. But you know what? It's not going to work that way. Kids are going to make mistakes. As little kids, as bigger kids, as adult kids, they're going to make mistakes. And it's very helpful early on to let them make small mistakes while they're still in the safety of your home. That way, you can kind of help with controlling the consequences or controlling the environment so that you can talk with them and say, now, you did this, and this is what happened. What can you learn from this? What can you do better next time that you don't get those consequences? Sometimes you're the one that has to deal out the consequences because you might have been the person who said, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. So we're not going to have that. So if they do that, you have to dole out those consequences. If you say, if they break curfew, or if they hit their sister again, or if they bite somebody at school, they're going to be grounded from their PlayStation, or they're going to have some sort of consequences for those actions to try and get them to understand those are not good things to do. You have to dole out the consequences. That's also part of being consistent that we talked about earlier. So allowing your children to fail while they're young, while they're in your house, helping them to understand what did you learn from it. The way we ask them questions in situations can help them think through, what did I do? And what did happen? And what can I do differently next time? Sometimes our nature, especially if we're overwhelmed, if we're busy, if we've got a lot of things going on, our nature is to not take that time. Our nature is to say, go to your room. Go to your room. I can't talk to you right now. Or some other knee-jerk reaction to something. But it's important that we as mothers and fathers, but we as mothers sit down and say, so what happened? What consequences did you get? And what can you do better next time? What would you do differently now that you have been through this situation? What would you do differently next time? And you can use this with little tiny kids. You don't have to wait till they're teenagers. You can use this with very small kids. And that helps them with little things, what seems little to us, but is very big in their life. You can help them think those things through so that as they get older, they can think, oh, I made that mistake then, and that's what happened. I'm not going to make that mistake again. We as adults, most of the time, will learn from our mistakes and say, I'm never doing that again. But it's very important for them to start that very young. That way they can avoid mistakes as they go through life. Another thing my kids will tell you I was really big on is taking responsibility, teaching them responsibility with chores. Oh, they hated it. We had a big chore chart, and it changed every week who had to do what chore. And there were rewards and there were consequences if it got done or if it didn't get done. But if we don't teach them young at home, how are they going to know when they go get a job? How are they going to know when they have their own house how to take responsibility for things? So once again, it's better for them to do it in the safety of our house while they're young than for them to go out in the workforce, just be willy-nilly at their job, and then the boss comes in and says, we can't have this, you're out of here. So it's very important, and it's hard. Believe me, it's hard. I'd rather load the dishwasher myself than to teach a kid how to do it. But that's the way it is. It's the only way to teach is for them to watch you, then help you. And little kids, young kids, they want to help. Mom, let me help you. Mom, can I help do that? Mom, can I do that? Catch them when they're asking to help. Start then, and then they get used to it. They get to understand how things are supposed to be done. You can correct them when they do something wrong. And yes, it takes longer to do all that teaching than it would be to just do it yourself, send them away and do it yourself. But it's so important. It's so important for them to understand that there are responsibilities being in a family. There are responsibilities living in a home. And that they will need to know these things. I always told my kids, yeah, you got to learn how to do laundry. I'm not going to go do your laundry when you move out. So you better learn how to do it now. So it's important to teach them those small jobs. Even a little toddler, you can teach them to put their toys back in the toy box. Make it simple for them. Have a big toy box and say, come on, we're going to put the toys in. Have them do it with you, and then later give it over to them. Tell them you have to put the toys in a toy box. And it takes repetition. Any kind of teaching takes repetition. And yes, it's frustrating sometimes. And yes, it's easier to do it yourself. But you know what? You will get the rewards when they're older and they do those things and they understand their responsibilities and they can take ownership of those things. And then they can see the rewards of it. They can see the rewards of working together as a team, of doing their part while everybody else does their part. And then we can all relax and watch a movie. We can all relax and go to the park. We can all do something together. Or each person, as they become teenagers, can go off and do their activities after they've done what they need to do at home. So start them young, give them little things to do, and teach them along the way. It makes it so much easier than waiting till 13, 14 and expecting them to understand, okay, now you got to do some jobs around the house. It doesn't work well that way. It's better to start early. If you have more than one child, and even if you just have one, celebrate their individuality. It is so much pressure on kids and on parents to be like everybody else. Especially now with social media and moms groups and so much going on that we kind of sometimes feel like our kid has to be a certain way, look a certain way, dress a certain way, act a certain way to fit in. And for us to look good, most importantly, for us to look good as a mom. But what's most important is that that person, that little child that's becoming a whole person, needs to be themselves. So much damage is done to kids when parents expect them to do this, expect them to dress that way, expect them to like things that they like when they don't. If you've got one kid that wants to dress goth, honey, it's going to last 6 months maybe. Let them dress that way. If they want to, after a certain age, if they want to color their hair, they want to do certain temporary things, let them express themselves. Let them express their individuality. You've got two girls One dresses frilly and makeup and jewelry and razzle dazzle Taylor Swift, and the other one wants to wear baseball shorts and caps and t-shirts and is what people label a tomboy. That's fine. Everybody doesn't have to be alike. How boring would it be if we were all alike? So be sure and foster their individuality, foster their individual interests. Just because a kid is a boy doesn't mean that he has to like sports, that he has to like trucks, that he has to like all the boy things. Maybe he likes drawing. Maybe he likes dancing. Maybe he likes just playing by himself. Maybe he likes building things with Legos. Don't force your child to be in a certain box. Let them show you who they are. Let them show you what their individual talents and interests and desires are, so that they can grow into the person that they are and not grow up one day and think, I don't even know who I am. I was trying to please mama. You don't want that. You want your kids to be themselves. So be mindful of that. Be mindful of trying to catch up and keep up with the Joneses and keep up with everybody you see on social media. Let your kids be themselves. And finally, probably the most important tip of all is being a good example. Probably the hardest tip of all is being a good example. None of us are perfect. Parenting is not about perfection, it's about progress. I didn't do everything right, you're not gonna do everything right. But when we do something wrong, we can go back and make amends. We can go back and apologize. It's not gonna hurt anything for you to apologize to your kids. But for the majority of the time, you need to be a good example to your kids. Show them how you handle yourself in certain situations. Talk to them about, not necessarily about adult situations, but talk to them about how you like to be with your friends or how you treat your friends. Let them see how you treat your friends. Let them see how you treat your spouse. Let them see all the things that you want them to become as part of their character, part of their values. You be that person, and they're going to catch that way faster and much deeper than something that you say to them over and over and over again. Be the good example in any situation you can possibly be in front of your kids. Spend time with them and show them what it's like to show empathy to other people, what it's like to treat people as individuals, what it's like to stick up for somebody else. They're going to catch that from you. And they're also going to catch the bad stuff too, honey. Don't think they're not, because they will. And when they do, you can say, Mama was wrong. Mama shouldn't have said that. And I don't want you to be like that either. So think about what kind of example you're setting for them. As I always say, Grandma knows best, but you know your kids best. Just keep doing what you're doing, and those little babies are going to be just fine. If I can do it with 5, I know you can do it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Be sure and like and share and subscribe. Send this to some mamas that you think might get some help out of these tips. See you next week.
I'll come back now. Here.